Welcome to the Iconic Podcast with me, Soon Yu, your host. The Iconic Podcast features candid conversations with successful Asian and AAPI leaders who share their personal journeys of challenges and triumphs.
And I just remember being very confused and disappointed because it's the first time I felt like I had failed. And I think when I look back to that, the most important lesson I taught myself was there is an incredible imperative and wisdom in knowing what you do not control. And the faster you can identify what you don't control and let it go, the faster you will be able to progress.
Welcome to the Iconic Podcast. I am extremely grateful today to have Bing Chen join me. Bing, welcome to the podcast.
My privilege. Hello, everyone.
Bing and the organization he founded, which is Gold House, is the executive sponsor for this podcast. So our guest, our focus, all the stuff that we've been able to share, Bing, you've been an instrumental part of that. And so thank you very much.
Oh my God, no, our privilege. Thank you for leading the way and convening all of us.
Yeah, no, it's great. So for those of you who don't know Bing, which it's hard to fathom, okay, but Bing is the founder of Gold House. And Gold House is, I would describe it, this incredible cultural ecosystem. It unites, it invests, and really it champions Asian creativity and meaning. And the more tangible aspects that you may have participated in or have attended or read about are obviously the Gold Gala they have every year, the A100 awards for recognition of our community. They have Gold House Ventures, the Gold Open. Maybe you guys purchased the theater for one of the movies. So there's so many things that the vision that you've created has actually manifested into tangible outcomes and impact. Other things, I go on accolades forever with you, but I would say you're the liberator of the creator economy. Yes, part of it, you're partly founder, but in many ways, you've been the liberator, taking people from being business people to being really content and I would call personalities that people then gravitate towards. So thank you for doing that for us. And obviously, you're doing other things. I think you're the founder of AU Holdings, which I can't wait to learn what you guys are going to come up with in the next year or two on that. You also started I want to pronounce it right, the Group?
Oh, yeah, nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, AU stands for awe, right? It's about awe.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, and is really, I think it's a multicultural film fund that is supporting filmmakers. And so that's great. And Bing, you're the first guest where when I was doing my research, most of the times, I listen to their podcasts or see videos of them and I play it at normal speed. And maybe the second time I'm listening, I'll play it at 1.5. Okay. You're the first time I've had to hit 0.75. Okay. Because.
Wow. High praise.
So that's the first for me is I've never actually had to slow down to play back. You're the first. And by the way, I was doing all this research on you. This is probably my second go around. I think you and I have tried to schedule this 3 times. And for whatever reason, we've had some headaches. But
the universe.
Yeah, but it's
3 times the charm.
But it's great because I've actually had 2 times to actually go back into research. And as I was thinking about and reflecting on all the stuff I've learned about you, there is a word I would describe. And me and my son actually did research and came up with this word. And I know you are a fan of words because you're an English lit creative writing major. And for me, you're a modern day polymath. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the word.
Wow, high praise.
Okay, polymath.
Of course,
okay?
It's high praise.
But the root of poly is in multiple, all right? Math is the idea of disciplines, okay? And so this is the idea that you're a multidisciplinarian who can take complex bodies of information, synthesize it, and create new innovation and new ideas. And, some great polymaths that people know about, obviously, are like Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Michelangelo, and Disney, right? These are people who are able to take multidisciplinary, I think, fields and put it together. And I really think, when you were talking about, I love what you're talking about in terms of the things that you learn about the idea of structure/systems married to stories, and that's the way to scale impact. For you, I look at your structure, your system is that you're a polymath. And then from that, you're able to do pattern recognition, right? and innovation and come up with new stories and new ideas. Your joyful resilience and joyful possibilities allow you then to take all that and create positive impact. And last thing I want to say about in terms of introducing Bing.
I was gonna say, can we talk every morning? My ego's never been so inflated in my life.
Well, I mean, this is the stuff you inspired when I was doing research on you. And
you're way too sweet.
There's this one quote by Goethe that really sums up, I think, everything about you, I believe. It's this quote that says, "Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." And Bing, that summarizes you. So audience, please welcome Bing as our guest today. Thank you, Bing.
Prepare to be disappointed. No, that was so flattering. I really don't know what to say.
Well, I've left you speechless. You're very loquacious, so that's amazing.
No. Some people are indescribable because they're impressive. Some people are indescribable because they just love too many things. I'm the latter.
So I always love beginning at the beginning, and it's amazing that you've become this polymath and you're doing all these bold things and creating all these incredible impacts for our community. But you start off, I think, pretty humble beginnings, right? Your family did, especially, right? In terms of, I believe your parents came over from Taiwan, and I think when I read, you said they had like $60 to their name, and so talk
That's
about them coming over and you growing up in, of all places, why did they choose Knoxville? I mean, a wonderful place. I spent some time in Greensboro, so similar at least latitude. So, but yeah, talk about that.
I think they were lost. It was honestly, it's because of their jobs. But no, I think growing up in Knoxville is one of the greatest sort of joys and privileges. I often say I get my heart from the South, where everyone's just so genteel. Everyone just gives their neighbor sugar because that's what you just do without want of reciprocity. And so I loved it. And I think outside of just a giving spirit, because it's something that's cardinal. It also made me realize how being different is indeed something special and not actually something to feel small by. We were one of the only, families of color. We were very different in every way. My food smelled differently and all that. And it was never a source of shame. It was always a source of great pride. And it reminds me, and I owe this entirely to my mother, but it reminds me of the Kurt Cobain quote of, "They laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at them because they're all the same." And I think since we were born, we were taught to be as different and giving as possible. So yeah, it was great.
No, and I think you talk a lot about both your mom and your father's influence in your life. And I love your mom talked about the specialness that comes from being different and how you've actually embraced that. And you and I actually share, I think, philosophy, a mindset. Early days of, I think, when TAF was being formed, and that was probably 2020, I had an early conversation with Norm, right? Norm Chen, who's the CEO. And I said, Norm, it's true. We definitely need to stand up against Asian hate and all these incredibly terrible things that are happening. At the same time, we've got to make sure that people know that we're not worried about being invited to the party or having a seat at the boardroom. We're throwing the best parties. And they're going to be lucky, damn lucky, if they get an invitation to our party, and we are going to be the party that everybody wants to be part of. And I think that's what Gold House is one great celebration of what it means to be Asian.
That's correct. I think there's always a dual strategy with everything, and I think this is no different. We call this change the house and build your own house. To be sure, we do want to be complicit in sort of existing systemic changes, and I do believe that for the most part, people are trying to do the best they can with what they have. So they have been complicit in that, and I would say the incredible renaissance and windfall of Asian creativity to the point where our diaspora is the only racial minority to make meaningful on-screen progress in the last few years, by 5 times, by the way, not just even a little bit or double digits, but for 500%, is because of the collective. It is the incumbents as well as sort of the new gen. But I share your sensibility soon. It's why would we want something that already exists? And further, if we're fixing something that's fundamentally broken, we're actually validating its foundation as truth. And I don't think that the way that we've done everything is the right way to do things. There's an incredible leader. He's now CEO of, I believe, Grammarly, but he was the head of product and engineering at YouTube, named Shishir Mehrotra. Often when there would be conflicts, he would pause everyone and say, we aren't even arguing over the same question.
Mm.
And we would realize that everyone's just throwing all the things out. People are spilling all sorts of nonsense because everyone needs to be heard, because a lot of his voice is heard. It's the one that gets promoted in corporate America. But he would always revert back to what is the core question and singular question that we're actually trying to answer. And then by virtue of that, what are the principles that we want to hear to guide our thinking to an answer? And so I think of that, I challenge the questions and the assumptions that we have. And that is entirely what informs sort of the new foundations of the new houses that we want to build. And really happily, Gold House is not about building a world formed by Asians. That's myopic, weird, delayed, etc. We are here to make all new majority cultures, all cultures, mainstream and visible and worth of belonging. We just happened to start with one that happened to be the biggest. And very happily now the team has just become this really aspirational force where all sorts of multicultural groups are our partners, are our teachers, our supporters. And it's just been a beautiful thing, I think.
Wow. I was looking at what you've just shared and the roots of how you came to that. And part of that stemmed from, obviously, the idea of celebration of differences and the specialness of differences. But it also stemmed from, I think, early in your childhood, you talked about this idea of the currency of well-likeness, right? This idea that you fit in everywhere and you were happy and you never felt like the victim. You always actually looked at every opportunity and every difference as potentially a new possibility, right? And you talked even about early on how you befriended somebody named Peyton, and that kind of was sort of the mindset that you've had in terms of embracing not only our community but other communities. Can you talk about sort of this childhood and how you grew up both with the celebration of differences, but also this idea of the currency of well-likeness?
Yeah, I think giving a damn about other people and being joyous is in my DNA. It's not just nurtured. And I think it's because my mom and dad tried to have kids for a decade. And so finally, when I was born, it wasn't because of me. It was just because of after a decade, you want anything that badly, or really more than a decade, you want anything badly, and you finally get it. You're just overjoyed. And there's something about the endorphins in your body that gets in the DNA of that offspring. But being able to see the joy and the magic in anyone and teasing it out has always been something inside of me. I was the kid in preschool who was always trying to build things really for others. And even to this day, the first interview question I ask, and I will stop the interview if there's not a fit, is what's the dream? And I find that most people, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, whether it's societal pressure, whether it's pragmatic considerations like you've got taxes, you got to take care of your parents and family, have never really availed themselves of this question. And so then you, of course, calibrate. You say, well, the dream would be if I gave you $10 billion in the gold Rolodex, and on the other side of every number is a yes, what would you do? And so I think just intrinsically, one, it starts out with how do you, whether biologically or it's nurtured in you, find the gifts that everyone has and help them share those with the world. I think second, at a perhaps more pragmatic level, I think being a third culture kid of being raised in Tennessee in my early years and then in Shanghai in my middle school years, forces you to realize the world is actually more similar than it's different. Agnostic of demographic or continental or nationalistic identity. And I entirely owe my parents for that. And then I think the third place that this comes from is watching my father die when I was 15 at a very young age. I think it was 54, 55, forced me to reconcile what really matters in life. And Allah, we are more similar than we are different. There's only really three things that matter to all of us in life. It is, can we live as long as possible? Can we be as meaningful as possible, hopefully concentric with a career? And third is, can we love and be loved as much as possible? And this, of course, takes different permutations, whether you have a spouse or kids or best friends or communal neighborhood, whatever. But invariably, all we want are those three things. And I feel very lucky to have been taught this at a very, very, very young age. And hopefully it persists all our work too.
Well, you talked about your father's passing and how seminal that was in terms of helping you realize there's just no time for bullshit, right? You only got so much time here, and you got to make use of it, and that makes use of the relationships that you have, and hopefully making the impact you're talking about. And those are two of the three things you were just talking about in terms of what people really want, and you got that clarity so early on in your life, and that's amazing. I was also really struck by the idea that Disney had a huge influence in your life. very early
Mm,
on. It still probably does, right? I mean, you've talked
mm.
about one of the archetypes you look up to is Disney. Talk about how Disney sort of, I don't know, crept in, weaved its way in, cartooned its way through, but basically had such a big impact in terms of your life and your thinking.
Yeah, I think it's probably three things. I think one is I've always been drawn to world builders for humanity. So my heroes when I was a child were Walt Disney, who I thought was Mickey Mouse, and the running joke is I thought Mickey was Asian because he had skin that looked like mine and had black hair, and because you're three, you think Mickey equals Disney, so Asian. Mother Teresa, Asian. Mahatma Gandhi, Asian. Martin Luther King Jr., black. And I think the consistency across all four of these people since I was three was they saved other people's lives by enabling other people's lives. And I've just always been drawn to that. And that was further, of course, cemented by the actual physical death of my dad of, oh, there's actually a deadline for this sort of, imperative too. I think the second moment that I always remember is Dumbo was the first movie I remember seeing, and certainly my favorite as a kid. My mom says I watched it like, however many times a week. Every time we went over with the babysitter, I'd always like put it on the VHS tape, back when VHS tapes were a thing. And I've tried to sort of I tried to overtly intellectualize why I was drawn to it. And the thing that always comes up that she says, not only does Dumbo love his mother, but which is of course what she leads with, but is really that this creature defied something that no one would allow. And I think I've just always been drawn to that defiance. And the defiance that is not trying to prove people wrong, but enable more people to be. And so that I will always remember that movie as, oh, like whoever made this sensation in me, if I'm able to scale and sustain it, that's the type of sort of impact I care about. And then as I grew older, being able to think about the really incredible combination of stories and systems. I mean, Disney has 5 to 6 divisions, but I would pose it's really a bifurcated model between original IP and content enablement, the studios networks, which is stories, and systems. You got the D2C platform, Disney Plus, you have site-based entertainment like the parks, and of course, CPG. But ultimately, those are just about how you interact with and enable your own stories or their own stories in the real world. So systems. And so I think at a practical level, everything I'm building today is entirely modeled off that sort of bifurcated vision of how do you change what people believe about the world, about themselves, about each other. And then secondly, how do you enable them to make it their own, whether it's through tactile products, software products, spaces, and so forth, forever and ever and ever. Yeah, that's effectively where it comes from. I don't agree with, obviously, no one does with, every single thing they have done, he did, and so forth, and believed. But the good stuff, I hold on to.
Yeah, no. And I think we'll come back to some Disney themes because I know your favorite movie is Beauty and the Beast, and we can talk a lot about that.
Also, yes.
The scene I remember crying, as an adult, was when Mulan handed the sword back to her father. Right? I just
yes,
I couldn't hold back.
Yes,
right?
how could you not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
on the Iconic podcast, we really celebrate the idea of the hero's journey. And fortunately for us, one of our partner organizations is at the forefront of celebrating our great heroes and their stories. And that organization we work with is Gold House. Gold House is a cultural ecosystem that unites, invests, and champions Asian Pacific leaders to power tomorrow for all of us. To learn more, please visit goldhouse.org.
I think what I learned is that confidence and conviction are not amassed because of the accumulation of achievements or awards or anything like that. They are entirely wrought from survival and, more importantly, from thriving in adversity. And if I am one thing at my core, I am the most resilient motherfucker. I can not only get through anything or out of anything, I can survive and thrive through anything.
But let's talk about this. I think UPenn probably taught you a lot about becoming a polymath and then pattern recognition. You were actually in finance for a while, then you did creative writing, then you did technology, and you took this idea of what I call structures and systems and stories, and you took that understanding, or maybe you were formulating it when you came to YouTube, right? You actually, in some ways, looked at it and said, hey, there are great stories being created every single day, content, right? And this is a democratized distribution structure system that can get it to as many people as possible. Why don't we give these people some pride in what they're doing? Why don't we recognize them? Why don't we acknowledge how important this content's going to be and how it's actually going to be a substitute for what's being created on, call it by the mass studios? Talk about that whole evolution and that awakening to this idea of the creator economy and the fact that you and obviously a couple other key folks really help liberate creators to create that economy.
Yeah, I mean, all things that are great and at the scale of what we did at YouTube come from both sort of preparation and luck. So on the preparation side, I had portended as much as a 21-year-old could, what is the new age sort of Walt Disney Company? And I was lucky enough to intern at Disney twice and had a profound appreciation for the creative process, but it was also the height of the economic recession. And it just seemed like the real game was not necessarily at content development, but as rather on the distribution side. Further, while distribution was not fully democratized across every device, e.g. mobile or even desktop, it seemed like it was going to get there. And further, I thought that whoever owned the sort of distribution pipes would actually inevitably be able to help out on the creation side. And so to that end, I thought YouTube was the 21st century articulation of the Walt Disney Company, and actually did not get an offer to interview at all, was actually a backup to a backup. And then was lucky to be the only person from Penn to actually go into the executive management program that's now defunct. And so that honestly it was totally luck. The other side though is YouTube had been organically a beacon for so many video makers and partners, as they were called at the time. Shanaz Zach, who is the product manager of the partner program, had built this really incredible 30,000 creator sort of walled garden effort to get access to certain benefits like monetization as well as thumbnails. Margaret Healy, who is the partner manager for the top 100 creators, was like the best friend and mom of the community. Jim Woods and his team handled all the customer support. And then my boss, Chris Hamilton, who to this day is without question my favorite human being and favorite boss by far, was doing kind of everything else. And I came in 2010, and I always remember Shanaz texting me saying, "We've been waiting for you," and me feeling this like very special, like, "Whoa, it's nice to be wanted," but not fully understanding what the responsibility was. And they had all these ideas and basically threw them at me and said, "No one is focusing on these people. You should do something." And Chris, to his credit, just gave me latitude to fly. And as a 22-year-old, you can't tell people what to do. No one believed in this because at the time YouTube wanted to be HBO or Netflix. So license a bunch of traditional premium film and series. They called it YouTube Rentals, and then use it as a Trojan horse to one day invest in our own premium originals, a la House of Cards in the case of Netflix. Mm-hmm. But I just, both because all these people had been percolating about this, and also because I grew up in this generation, there just seemed to be something much more interesting about democratizing the creation of content for more people, creating sort of Oprah from anyone. And so I collated all these ideas, and then, like a good artist, started adapting and stealing from others. And we basically realized a couple of things. That one, all creators want the same things. They just talk about them differently. They want fame, fortune, creativity, skills, recognition from the platform they care about, and connection with each other. Recognition and connection are actually flipped. So that was one. The second thing was we were given basically no budget and told to piss ourselves. So Chris, to his credit, fought really, really hard for us, but all the budget was going to traditional rentals and sucking the teat of proverbial Hollywood. And so I had to do the only thing that a 22-year-old could and learn everyone else's priorities in the company who touched content and a la what is your dream and what will get you promoted, and try to force fit people together. So we borrowed people's time for this thing. Fast forward a year, we had created this deck, it got approved, and we launched a slate of 10 different efforts that I called Walt Disney in 2010 at the time. In it were fame-building efforts like a gold play button that my friends Gavin Lung and Grant LaFontaine eventually executed on the production side. The impetus of that, by the way, was I realized that no creator knew what success was on the platform. And I remember we quoted Will Smith and said that if you don't know where you are, you can't know where you're going. And so we created the gold play button. I stole it entirely from the music industry. We also had a globalized partner program monetization that I was lucky enough to lead that scaled it from 9 to 42 countries, which dramatically increased top line revenue, made it commercially viable, but also just culturally interesting because we were able to sustain the careers of all these creative sort of people. And then third is really honing their creativity so that it wasn't trying to be better than Hollywood, but it was trying to be different. And then this were everything from our first YouTube schools, we call the YouTube Creator Academy, all the way to Next Up, which is now the longest standing content accelerator and incubator at YouTube. Still exists to this day, all the way to everything on youtube.com/creators, including youtube.com/creators. And so it was just this amazing experience of being able to understand what other people want, collaborate with them, use borrowed time, and everything, almost everything we did worked. And it not only worked, it worked so well, it became the highest priority within 2 years at YouTube. Salar, I remember the CEO, never talked publicly at the time. And we somehow coerced him into speaking at VidCon. Chris Hamilton gets a lot of credit for that. And I think when the CEO does something, something becomes important. But I just remember that being a real capstone for us, because right before it, Annie Baxter, who is our PR lead at the time, I decided to call them creators, and it was like a 6-month journey to convince internal YouTube that this was a better term than partners and video makers, because those were too corporate. And you had all these like pious people who were like, well, you can't call it a creator because that's taken by Jesus. But I remember Annie said, Bing, we can't just call it creators because no one's taking it seriously internally still. We should make this feel like a real economy. And that's when the term creator economy was born in 2011, which I don't think history gives her credit. I've seen all these cute little VCs try to take credit for our work, but Annie Baxter gets credit for that. And lo and behold, that is the terminology that people use to this day. My friend Steph Wendelin and the Zoo standardized our advertising rates to create influencer marketing, which is now a thing too. But yeah, it was amazing. And I think that the whole impetus again is, how do you just build better sort of creator worlds that can sustain people commercially?
I think the major outcome of that was engagement, right? I mean, just audience engagement, content creator engagement, just people became so much more engaged with sort of the online distribution of information, of entertainment, of shared stories. And that's incredible. I mean, you think about, if you were to map the level of engagement that we've had with YouTube or platforms like YouTube to the idea of the creator economy and the creation of that would be, I think, a high correlation. And I love the idea that within YouTube, you had to be kind of an entrepreneur. You basically had to go in there and kind of figure out how to sell an idea and make it happen in the constraints and the confines that were basically at that time kind of a startup corporation, kind of both startup and a corporation, right? And I find that truly amazing. And I also just want to say, thank you. Our team are now creators because of you too, because with the podcast, we are creating, right? And that's great. So with so much success and the fact that all these things that you did to create, fortune, creativity, skills, connection, and recognition for the creators were so well, what would actually prompt you to leave YouTube?
Yeah, it's so easy. My dream has been to be the new Walt Disney, but existential, since I was, I don't know, as long as you can remember, 7, 6, probably earlier. And so I always was very transparent that I went to YouTube to learn, and it would be gone in 2 years, but was very lucky and did very well, and loved it, honestly. And so I stayed for 5 years. So it was always part of the plan to leave. The moment that I distinctly remember of pushing me to leave, though, was I just globalized the partner program to 50 plus countries. It brought in $400 million of revenue. It was a third of top line, not including the ancillary revenue that we would get from traditional media. So it's actually probably twice that. And I remember I was in Salar's, the CEO at the time, before Susan, staff meeting, which I usually, of course, did not sit in. My boss's boss did. And we were going around a circle and everyone's giving their updates, and everyone's getting ripped a new one except for me, who had cool news. There's a downside, by the way, to what we did. It just completely depreciated the display advertising market, which is not good. But overall, it was very positive. And I remember thinking, for someone who constantly is devoted to growth and abundance and building, I would literally be doing the same job a decade later with a slightly fancier title and slightly more money. And that just, to me, is death. And so that was the specific moment that I decided, okay, it's probably time to go. And then the final piece was YouTube is and Google are very, very good to me. And they were very clear that the worst case scenario, if your whatever doesn't work, you can just come back to your open arms. It's super easy. So I think we often glamorize entrepreneurship as something where you slip on the couch, you have no salary and so forth. But the overwhelming majority of the people I know, the studies I've seen, is we all had great plan Bs. And my plan B was very luckily, just going back to at the time, best company in the world. So it was actually a very easy decision. I think what happened after became a little bit more challenging, but nothing we didn't surmount eventually.
Yeah, let's talk about what happened afterwards. So that I love I appreciate a couple things you said about that. One, that it was sort of in your plan that this was a stepping stone, an important stepping stone. And I also appreciate the idea that, versus somebody who started with nothing and didn't have any other options, you had many. And so it's great. It's gracious for you to say that, because I think it just recognizes that for those who did have nothing, they had a much harder haul. Now, let's talk about this
Indeed.
idea that, yeah, indeed, right? And we just acknowledge that those people who've done that, it's an incredible journey that they've been on. And obviously, you
Yes.
have been an incredible journey. Now, you participated in, I believe, another startup, but that didn't turn out as well. And, we talk about this idea of a rock bottom moments. I'm assume one of the tough, difficult moments in your life is when your father passed. I'm assuming from a career perspective, this was probably one of your rock bottom moments in terms of what you were doing. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, super easy. I'm not supposed to, but I've talked about it so many times that I think the anti-defamation clause has forgotten itself. Uh, Basically, I was promised the world. I was very open about me wanting to build my own Walt Disney company. I neglected my creative side for the 5 years at YouTube and had regretted it immensely. And if I had to choose one lane, I would choose creativity for just personal reasons. I'm 51% empathetic on that side, 49% a systems thinker and builder. And so I won't say who, but a very prominent person said, well, Bing, you can basically do this at this startup. Our tech is basically done. It'll be done in a month. You can be chief creative. So you can, have all the wherewithal to do the content side. And I, as a young whippersnapper who really liked this person and had some reps with them at YouTube, believed them. And so I jumped. We raised $50 million on mostly my and that person's back because of our pedigrees from the likes of John Doerr and Kleiner, who we love to this day. And I'll get to that full circle moment in a moment. And basically, the product never launched. A year later, which I gave it a year, which was entirely too long, but maybe feels responsible in a conventional sense. The product was maybe 30% of what I was promised a year before. Second, I had no ability to influence it because I oversaw all the business and creative functions, which absolutely crushed it. It's entirely what we raised our $50 million on. And third, one of our co-founders ended up being a walking Me Too movement, sexually harassed both the head of product, his closest counterpart, and the head of HR. This is pre-Me Too, I should have mentioned. And so there was not language to describe this back then. And so I went to the CEO. He did nothing after a month. So then I went to the executive chairman who kind of sort of derogatorily said, what's going on? And I said, well, look, the product isn't delivered. This is a tech platform. And also this guy's an asshole. Because what ends up happening is you don't just hurt those two women in that case. You give everyone else permission to do any form of malfeasance. And I'm my single mother's son. I have no tolerance for these things. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, Bing, don't be naive. These things happen all the time. And that was the definitive moment that I said, fuck these guys. I'm never working for someone less talented than me again. And there are very few people, I don't mean this in an arrogant way. There are very few people with my passion, drive, resourcefulness, no bullshitness. There are very, very, very few people that I would work for. And that was the moment I said, okay, I'm going to go bet on myself now. They tried to drag my name in the industry because they are incentivized to and would do all this gaslighting of like, oh, I hear you're telling people the real reason you left. We hope that's not true. And I just remember being very confused and disappointed because it's the first time I felt like I had failed, even though I had not failed. I had just been on a ship that had failed. And I think when I look back to that, the most important lesson I taught myself was there is an incredible imperative and wisdom in knowing what you do not control. And the faster you can identify what you don't control and let it go, the faster you will be able to progress. And it took me maybe half a year to learn that, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. But when you're 27, 28, youth is everything. But that forever changed me. And to this day, I have an uncompromising bar for excellence and ethics. If you harass anyone in any way, you not only will be found out by me, you will be effectively living dead by me. And I do mean that. The people who try to lament our work and so forth these days are 100% of the time either uninformed, envious, or have been excommunicated because of this. And I hold this unflinching line from that. Further, I think the other thing this really gave me was the conviction to believe in myself, because I think what I learned is that confidence and conviction are not amassed because of the accumulation of achievements or awards or anything like that. They are entirely wrought from survival and, more importantly, from thriving in adversity. And if I am one thing at my core, I am the most resilient motherfucker. I can not only get through anything or out of anything, I can survive and thrive through anything. And there's been other examples that are more biological, like actually life and death, that have validated that for me, fortunately or unfortunately, and now fortunately. But that's what that period taught me. I can do anything, not because I have or because I will, but because I can survive anything. And there's an immense freedom that comes with that. Fast forward, John Doerr is Goldhouse's single biggest investor and donor. And so the good guys always win, by the way, it just takes a little bit longer. And those naysayers or shit talkers are all begging to work with us in all the ways now. And it is the cutest thing when they now walk into my spaces and I look at them and I remind them of those days, because an elephant never forgets. And I'm not petty about it. I just need people to know that heart is as important as what you do with your hands, and that this is not a place where we suffer bullshit. And so it's been really satisfying not to prove people wrong, but more importantly, to do the right thing and be able to be uncompromising in it. So that is the hardest professional experience, because it wasn't even caused by me, but I was a part of it. And that sucks.
Well, I think some of the hardest ones are when you are attached or you failed. Let's just face it. Whatever credit or where it goes, you failed at something. And
yes,
when the failure is out of your control, to me, that is probably one of the most frustrating moments in your life, when it's out of your control, right? And because there's not much you could have done to change that outcome, and yet you're attached to it. Now, you can reflect and say, yeah, I could have done it sooner. Honestly, you did it. It was a year and a half. You figured that out. I mean, I spent a whole life being on the other side, being ignorant. When I was young, I would say dumb things and get myself in trouble and have bad role models and be complicit. And I had to learn the hard way, and so for you to be able in a year and a half to figure that out, I give you full credit. It might've been painful, right? But there's so many of us.
Very sweet of you.
There are so many of us who, out of either legacy or fear of what's out there or the unknown, have a hard time either making a change of our environment or honestly making a change of ourselves. And sometimes both are required. And so I'm giving you full credit for being able to figure that out so soon. I do love this idea.
And we continue to grow and learn.
I do love the idea that, I wouldn't say it's vindictive, but I love this idea that you haven't forgotten. Okay. And that's so human. And in some ways, the idea of the chip in the shoulder, I've talked to a lot of my guests, that's what fuels a lot of people's motivation and success, is to be able to say, hey, I'm proving myself. And, not just to them, but, to myself. And so kudos to you for that. So let's move forward.
For me, it's less petty. Yeah. For me, it's more protection. Because you have to know, how do I say, it's so many people operate by water. They are only here when you can serve them. We operate with blood. So I am the first call so many times when someone falls. That's my mark of success. Who do you feel safe with? Because if you feel safe with someone, you could do anything with them. So it's more that I don't trust the people who are that transactional.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder of, why you're doing what you're doing too, right? And help others. And
Yeah. Is it the best way? Am I a billionaire yet? Half of my other friends right now? No. Will I be one day? Maybe. If I'm not, who cares?
Yeah. Who cares? I think
we're all going to die.
Who cares, right?
We're all going to die.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the impact you're having and the seeds of that oftentimes won't be seen by you, actually. By the time you're gone, that's probably when things will really start taking off. Or it sounds kind of morbid to talk about that, but that is true in terms of what legacy is, right? During the height of the Asian hate crimes, I was left with a sense of disbelief and anger. These feelings prompted me to write a Forbes article titled, "Who Owns the AAPI Brand?" It's clear that branding such a diverse community is difficult. Yet in the absence of a cohesive brand narrative, derogatory stereotypes and racial slurs were created. Fortunately, the AAPI community did come together and form TAF, the Asian American Foundation, to not only combat Asian hate, but to also share positive narratives that fight bias and promote belonging. TAF has launched numerous programs to support this effort, including the Iconic Podcast. Please visit TAF.org to learn more, and to subscribe to this podcast, please visit iconicpodcast.com. Join me in supporting TAF, because together we make a difference. But I want to talk about going back. Let's go back to 2018. This is pre-pandemic, and you've left that company that you were, miserable at, and you are doing road shows with Kevin Lin, who is the founder of Twitch. And what prompted you to do those road shows? And then I also want you to talk about that fateful dinner at Chef Chu's in Los Gatos. That was it Los Altos or Los Gatos? Los Altos, right? That was pretty seminal in terms of the next movement that you got involved in.
So at the time, I was investing in my own creative franchise, which will finally come out starting early next year. It's been a decade, which is so wild.
And this is AU Holdings, correct? AU Holding?
Yes, that's under all. Yep.
Holdings? Yeah, okay.
Correct. There's a platform and a franchise we've been working God so long on, but it's the best thing I've ever done, even though it's been the hardest. But in tandem, a bunch of us were in a room, and it was a bunch of old East Asian men, and everyone was lamenting why the diaspora was not thriving to the degree that the African and Israeli diaspora were. And it was people like Kevin Lin in the circle, Janet, who's president of the Academy, director John M. Chu, et cetera, Purple Growing, et cetera, a bunch of people. And the first thing we realized is, well, a bunch of old East Asian men in real estate finance are probably problem number one. That's not what the world looks like. And so Kevin and I, a la our style, thought, okay, well, how do we actually change this? And partly because of Kevin's just also from the South, really genteel, sort of shared vision guy. And also just my training at YouTube, where I had to work federatively because I was by the time I left, mid-senior level IC with only one budget. Like you have to placate others in order to rise and do anything. We met with 500 of the people that we knew. And we met one-on-one because I don't trust people's research. I need to hear it with my own ears because things can get distorted. And in this list were CEOs, A-list celebrities, Olympic gold medalists, community leaders, all the above. And we asked them, if you were to create the benevolent Asian mafia, what would you do and why? And our lens or thesis was very different, I think, from what most organizations who'd come before us did. We weren't here to fight hate or to right wrongs. We saw the intrinsic cool factor of our diaspora. We saw that we are a majority of the world. We saw that we're the fastest growing. We saw that even though some people think we're not creative, by almost every superlative, we're the most creative. We have the most lucrative creative franchise in Pokemon, the most awarded film of all time in a single season, Everything Everywhere, the most awarded series of all time in a single season, Shogun, the most watched show of all time on Netflix, Squid Game. We are actually killing it in so many places. And for some reason, there is a distortion in perceptions in certain hemispheres. And so, of course, because humans are more concentric than they are different, everyone said the same four things in the exact same descending order. We also, Monty Macedo of Bain, who's also one of our investors, gave us a free study on this, and they came up with the same thing. Thank you, Monty. And basically, everyone thought that none of us supported each other. There was no consistent and aspirational set of imagery in media. Third is no one could ascend to the C-suite or boards. And fourth is we had no organized political power despite being the fastest growing base. Plus, none of us actually ended up voting. And so, or many, I should say. And so we tackled one by one. We first built an Asian mafia. And a la how you build any network, we started out with concentric niche industries. We realized that there were really four that control culture: media and entertainment, lifestyle, technology, and finance. And so we went after so many of the top leaders who we knew were not just in their own heads, but wanted to build something bigger than themselves and not wait till they were 50 and 60 to do so. So that was step one. And we made sure it was 50% women, 33% South Asian. So accurately reflected the global diasporic numbers as well for the first time. Wow. The second was we needed a rallying cry. So the second issue was, of course, how do we have better portrayals in media? And after doing so much digging and research with all of our Hollywood friends and as well as media friends in New York, we realized that the foundational issue was not a creative class. There were indeed so many incredible creatives already. The issue was that the traditional system did not believe there was a viable market for us. And so that's correct. It's money makes the world go round. The one color we all see, or the binary country, the many colors we see. And so basically we got together and we wanted to figure out Jeffersonian style, how do we actually solve this? And so John M. Chu is a very old friend from YouTube days, and had this gift called Crazy Rich Asians. And we got on the phone and he said, Bing, this film is only going to do 12 to $15 million at the box office, which means it will fail. And confidentially, there are 4 other Asian-led studio projects that will get backburned if that happens. And so we said, well, Kevin and I were like, that's not okay. So we got this dinner together of this beautiful intersection of the most pioneering young Asian founders and creatives and said, how do we fix this? And because all good artists steal and adapt, we borrowed what the Black community and women had done in the late 80s, 90s, and 2000s of bulk buying and bulk attending opening weekend, because it's a direct corollary to additional marketing investment. And then there's a flywheel from there. Further, I've always been moved so much by what Chance the Rapper has done in buying theaters for communities for whom a $10 to $20 ticket is cost prohibitive. And so we thought, okay, well, let's not only have traditional celebrities, let's have industry celebrities. The founders of YouTube, Twitch, Pinterest, Snap, et cetera, the defining platforms of the consumer generation are all from our people. And so we paired them up with celebrities to put them on the same level as celebrity, because you shouldn't have to be an actor to be famous, right? You should be doing good work to be famous. And so fast forward, it worked. We sold $7 million worth of theaters. That movement has known as Gold Open, which is now evolved into certified gold, has been lit up over 150 times for different films and titles, from Parasite to Everything Everywhere, and completely helped shift the narrative and economic outcome for all these projects. It is now, of course, been expanded to a 5-pronged strategy. So there's multiple companies now on that. But John gets so much credit for having not only an incredible piece of work, but being a pioneer of inclusion in a way that is not apologetic or charitable, in a way that sort of transcends both culture and industry. And to say the obvious, he just did it again with Wicked.
He did.
You know? And so, yeah, John's a genius and deserves it. And yeah.
I think this idea of economic is important. And I think the key to there is we have high appeal. And I think being able to showcase that appeal, it's what you and I talked about. We have the biggest and best party out there. And so people should be wanting to get the invitation to our party. And that's what I think you guys created with Gold Open. And I think from that, you were able to really take all that energy and that network and the stories and create a system called Gold House. And it's really... Can you talk a little bit about what Gold House has done from that moment in terms of from Gold Open to what it's doing today?
Yeah, Gold House is devoted to changing culture together. We believe that when we all come together with all of our gifts and resources, we can shift how people see each other and treat each other, how they can sustain opportunity through impact and do so for the world. And so on media representation, we've consulted on over 600 major film and series projects, all the way now expanding to video games, music, Broadway publishing, on literally everything to ensure that our stories are not just aspirational, but authentic. This is casting, product placement, script review, et cetera. We're also now devoted to reshaping greenlighting power. So we have a top decile performing content studio and invest in independent film and independent media companies, because we think the next Marvel can absolutely come from our heritage and culture in so many ways that already has in the case of Pokemon, Naruto, and so forth. And then third, our marketing apparatus is about to dramatically expand through distribution. Because being able to reach all the people in the way that you want is important. The second apparatus, the sister apparatus, is our venture work. So we have now the largest top Asia Pacific founder network, the leading founder accelerator for our community, whose alumni have raised $2.5 billion in follow-on capital. Aura Health and Aura Ring is actually in our first class as one recent example and success. And we have a top decile performing venture fund. And the whole point of that and everything we do is not just delivering something industry leading that is profitable, wins all the awards, et cetera, but also that is impactful for culture. So on the venture side, not only are we trying to yield top decile returns and all that, but we're actually trying to use it to bridge the next wave of business opportunity, whether it's across the Pacific, whether it's our communities hiring inclusively of others, while also, of course, dismantling the bamboo ceiling, as it's called. And then the final piece of what we do is mainstream culture. I find and lament that so often God's work looks like God's work. There's no bow around it. And so we care deeply and strategically about how do we make sure this gets out in the mainstream, so that's in exactly what you said. We're not trying to make the best Asian blank. We're trying to make the best blank, period. Even when you look at, silly things like Gold Gala, Vogue and CNN say this is the Asian Met Gala, all of our friends, agnostic of their heritage, now want to come because we have the best gala on the West Coast by far. And so even to a microscopic level like that, the goal is how do we just redefine what is mainstream so that everyone and anything can become it. So yeah, that's where we are now.
I am so excited about, I mean, you're honestly scratching the surface because we represent 60% of the population. That means 60% of the creativity, 60% of the innovation, 60% of the stories, and they're just now being told, and they're so good, right? I think I can't wait for your incredible franchise to launch in the next year or two.
Thanks.
Can you give us a little hint? I know one of my research, because you've been kind of tight-lipped about it, it is about the franchise of death. And I'm trying to think, is it an economic, is it a cultural, is it a social sort of encapsulation of the concept of death, or does it go beyond that?
All the above. I'll be annoying. I'll give you pieces. It is about death. It is a trilogy of trilogies. We're releasing number 4 first, just like Star Wars. There will be 4 synchronous assets at launch, so it will feel like a proper franchise. And I hope that it not only reshapes how we think about death, but most importantly, how we live. I'm also drawn to, I think this is honestly probably because I'm not creative enough. Like I could never come up with a Wizarding World or Lord of the Rings, but I've always been drawn to real world or realistic fiction. So everything has or will happen, or we're producing it in this fictitious universe. So it's going to be this very bizarre art imitates life imitates art franchise. So that's a component. So many real world things as they are in it. Most of all, I hope it inspires people to find their gift as quickly as possible. The other important detail of why it's taken so long is it's a long spoken word poem. It is not a traditional novel. It is highly lyrical. It is highly poetic. The dialogue is written almost as script dialogue. Sometimes with stanzas, sometimes not. We sort of break sort of the structure in many cases. That's the most I can say. And the 3 big partners are the 3 market leaders in their respective categories. That's all I can say.
That's a lot of hints. Anyone that wants to do the research, I'm sure, could figure out and fill in the blanks for all those things.
No pre-announcing.
Yes, and by the way, we had Charles Yu on, and I think he probably shares some of this idea of the long poem and the idea of writing a screenplay as a script. And so I'm sure this innovation in how you guys are telling and storytelling is going to be very fascinating. Bing, thank you for being such an incredible polymath and for having so much impact and for world building the world I'm living in now. And I think that is about the best compliment I could pay anybody, is that's exactly what you're doing. As we sort of close this out, we always ask our guests to think of other guests that we'd like to invite. Obviously, you've mentioned some important names of important people that probably have great stories and who have been change makers and that really add to, I think, the podcast. Who might you want us to interview in the next few episodes to really help their stories be shared?
I'll say 2. I'll cheat with the second one. The first one is I'd love to see an animated character on the show.
Okay.
Because we are so well known for so many of them. And I'm not trying to dehumanize us, by the way. I just think it'd be so compelling. This is partly coming from Duolingo's now resurrection, or Duo's resurrection. I just think there's something interesting about that would be hilarious and funny. The second one, which I'm going to cheat on because I know you're already in the process, is Janet Yang is finishing her tenure as president of the Academy and will soon announce what she's been working on secretly. And it is so full circle and just does everyone justice and hits every box, from the most canonical IP to the newest way to do things with a new majority cohort with tons of joy and pain. And so I think if she's able to share what it is, she is for sure the one. Wow. It's truly not an exaggeration to say in her own way, it's sort of like Avengers coming together. Just you never saw the first 9 years of films. So it's going to be so special. So I would say her.
I'm looking forward to having Janet on. We've been in contact and we're very hopeful. Bing, thank you so much. Thank you for being a sponsor of the podcast and of so many other things, and just for being that kindred spirit that inspired me to, do the research, but more importantly, to feel more inspired to do what I'm doing. Thank you, Bing.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for all the kind words. I will replay them every night when I feel low.
Listen to all episodes of Aconic on aconicpodcast.com. You can also catch new episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.